I'm Barb Cashman, and I presented today the Lunchtime CLE that's part of the Small Firm Big Success series. And today the topic was Death of a Solo, Death of a Law Practice, and looking at the inevitable, facing the inevitable, and getting some written plans in place. So we had a pretty good crowd today, and it was mostly baby boomers who were looking to put something in place. So that was good. I had a willing audience, which is always a good thing. But basically, we looked at some of the human factors that are difficulties in overcoming the inertia of putting a plan in place. So I started with my observation. A few years back, I interviewed some of my trust estate colleagues, a little over, it was about 14 of them. Exactly one person had a will that addressed her law practice. So I knew that I was dealing with mostly colleagues who were shoeless cobblers. So I figured the rest of my colleagues, my solo small firm colleagues, are kind of in the same boat. And we are, and this is where lawyers are human. Most people don't have wills. Most people don't have durable powers in place. And why should lawyers be any different? Well, there's some good reasons, but I won't go there. So we talked about some of the difficulties in finding a person that you could name as an agent. So the first step in the changing the thinking, I guess, getting over that inertial hump, is thinking about what would happen if and what would happen when. So since none of us knows when we're going to die, we all know that we're going to die someday. We don't know whether we're going to be incapacitated or disabled at some point before our death. So most of us who are solos think about, well, it would be nice if I have a short-term disability, if a colleague of mine could come in and keep things going. So when I could come back to practice law, there would actually still be a practice there. So we talked about those scenarios and also the will provisions that I've included in the materials. So I have a fair number of materials available, and I would say some of them are in the original version from a 2010 CLE called Planning Ahead, and I also presented a newer variation of my power of attorney at the Elder Law Retreat last summer. So I've been at this a little while, but I want to welcome attorneys, solo attorneys, if they're looking for some documents to get started with, get in touch with me. I'm happy to share. That's why I put this stuff together, is I think we're all in this together. I know I couldn't function as a solo without the support and wisdom of all of my colleagues who are also solos. And so we're kind of there to support each other, and I think this is a good way of doing that. It's also a good way of making sure that our relationship with our clients, our fiduciary relationship, is intact if something happens to us. So we talked about the third restatement on the law of lawyers, and basically the idea that a lawyer's duty of competence might include having some plans in place for disability and death. Okay, so it would be preserving those client rights, their property, their any rights they have under a contract with the attorney, things that the attorney has done for them, that sort of thing. So it's really preserving that fiduciary relationship. And then what we also talked about were some of the, again, getting back to the documents, how important it is to get in writing. A lot of us, we know that on our professional liability contracts, they ask us, well, who's your second? That's a good place to start, but your second, whose name you filled out on that line in your contract, really doesn't have the legal authority to act for you unless you have some documents that give that authority to that person. So better to have those plans in place and select the person and select the kind of things that they can do for you than to kind of keep your head in the sand, hope for the best, and then wait for a disaster to happen, and then Attorney Regulation Council gets involved. court orders go out about managing your Coltaf trust account, maybe also your business account, and inventory counsel comes in and helps attorney regulation kind of get things under control. So that's obviously for closing down a practice. I think it could also be for maintaining a practice, but we haven't really seen that before. So lastly, what I talked about was the solo small firm section being a resource for helping people who are so inclined to find an agent, to find someone who could work with a personal representative or serve as personal representative for a solo or small firm colleagues for their estate plan under their will, to really help take care of things, to maintain those client interests, make things, the transition, the closure, the succession plan, whatever it is that's envisioned in the documents, make that as seamless as possible so that really the family members can take care of the person, which is what they really ought to be doing, and not trying to figure out what they should do about the person's law practice. So in that respect, I think the solo small firm section is open to having this topic talked about at network meetings, those lunch and breakfast and sometimes happy hour meetings, and maybe also putting together some opportunities for like-minded attorneys to get together, talk to each other about pairing up, basically, kind of a I'll scratch your back if you scratch mine kind of thing, and most importantly, having the documents in place. So are there documents that are must-haves that, oh, you have to have these kind of provisions with this kind of language? No. The documents that I've come up with are a good place to start, but you can obviously personalize them as you see fit, and you will want to make sure that they fit in with your practice. But it is important for all of us to think about in our day-to-day lives what gives our lives meaning. And thinking about death is not particularly pleasant, but it is part of our life. And I think if we're a careful planning kind of person, it's easier to think about this and to think about how we might make our surviving spouse, our kids' lives easier if we have some plans in place. So that's what today's about. And I'm sure this is not the first time I've talked with my colleagues about this subject, and I'm sure it won't be the last. But if you have questions about it, definitely get in touch with me, because like I said, I'm happy to share my documents. Thanks.